Okay, so what we're going to do today is like an extension of what we've been doing. Okay, so like I was saying a minute ago, just factoring. So let me get these cleared off. Any day now would be great. Let's see. And so we're multiplying rationals. There we go, finally. And tomorrow I'm going to show you how to divide. It's not much different than multiplying. It's just one little extra step. And then Monday we have tomorrow we're going to, like I say, divide. Then Monday we have a review, and Tuesday we have a test. So hopefully, you've got to, if you can't factor, then it's going to make that test be really difficult for you, and that's not what we want. Okay? Okay, so looking at this, here, these are monomials. A monomial has one term. So like, that's a monomial, that's a monomial, that's a monomial, that's a monomial. Now, these, you can kind of do whatever floats your boat here, okay? You could go ahead and just multiply straight across. You could do 8 times 14 and get a really big number, okay? And do 26 times 12 and get a really big number, and then reduce that really big number. That would be fine. But what I kind of like to do is I kind of like to get some reducing done ahead of time. Like I see that 14 twelfths can reduce to what? What can 14 twelfths reduce to? Oh, thank you. Okay. What can 14 twelfths reduce to? 7, what? 7/6, okay? Now, you can even, what is 8/26 reduce to? What will they both divide by? They're both even numbers. They'll both divide by what? 2, okay? So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 26 divided by 2 is 13. Now, you might want to now just multiply straight across the top, but if you are a big reducer kind of person, you can even reduce 4/6. To reduce, one has to be on the top, one has to be on the bottom. You could keep reducing to 4/6. Or if you want to go ahead and multiply straight across the top, you can. Let's do that. So we get 28. What's 13 times 6? You have calculators. 70 what? 8. Okay. Now, I see 78 and 28 are both even numbers, so they can reduce again, and that makes sense because I didn't reduce that 4/6 over here. So what is 28 divided by 78? Or read it. What will 28 and 78 both divide by? Probably a 2. Maybe a 4. So start typing down the calculator, start telling me how to reduce this. Okay, if they divide by 2, we get what? 14 and what? 39. Will 39 divide by anything that 14 will divide by? No, 14 will divide by 7 and 2 and 14, and 39 won't divide by 7 or 2 or 14. So we've reduced it all the way. Okay, so now let's look at our variables. So across, because to multiply stuff, you go across the top. So x to the third and y to the fourth, they don't mix because they're different variables. But on the bottom here in the denominator, we have an x and an x squared, which would make a what? X cubed, or x to the third power, and then we have a y. So that's already reduced, our 14 and 39. X to the thirds cancel out. What about our y to the fourths? What? Y cubed, where does the y cubed go? On the top, right? Because you subtract. 4 minus 1 is 3. And so that's our final answer. I would say that most problems don't have that much reducing to do that we're going to give you, but that was a good practice one on how to reduce. Okay? So then we have some binomials and trinomials too that we have to factor and multiply. Okay? So in the top left here, what will 3x to the third and 6x both divide by? A 3 and a what? And an x squared, okay? So do not forget to make sure you bring that 3x squared out to the side, okay? That's your GCF. So when you divide 3x to the third divided by 3x squared, what do you get? You get an x. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. Okay, down here in the bottom left, they'll both divide by an x. They both have an x in common, and then we get what? X plus 1. I'm always looking to see, who am I going to get to cancel out later down the road? You don't really have to do that if you don't want to. You can just focus on the factoring, but I'm kind of always keeping a little eye out for that. Okay, 4x squared and 4x, what will they both divide by? A 4, whoa, and an x, right, I almost forgot my x. And then when we do that, we get what? X plus 1. Okay, good. And 6x and 12 will both divide by a 6, and we get x plus 2. Okay, so now comes the fun part. We get to kind of cancel some stuff out. The x plus 2's cancel. You just have to have one on the top and one on the bottom. They can be in different locations, you know, different places left or right, but one on the top, one on the bottom. And then I would say the x plus 1's cancel. So let's try to maybe clean this up here. So going across here, we have 3x squared and 4x. Well, when we multiply those together, we get 12x to the third, good, and we get 6x on the bottom, right? 6x. Okay, so 12 divided by 6 is 2. Where do we write the 2, top or the bottom? On the top, because 12 divided by 6 is 2. If we were to write it on the bottom, we would be saying that 12 divided by 6 is 1/2. And how do we handle the x to the third divided by x? You subtract the exponents. 3 minus 1 is 2. And so we have x squared. Where do we put it? In the top in the numerator. Okay? If you get confused where to put it, stretch it out, draw it out like that. Oh yeah, my x squareds go on the top. Okay? Okie doke. So now, let's do this one. Okay? How does this factor? X squared minus 9. It's one of those super easy ones. Yeah, they're perfect squares. It's difference because it's minus of perfect squares. Difference of 2 squares. So x plus 3, x minus 3. How does it factor on the bottom? In the numerator. X plus 2, x minus 2. Okay, up here, what can they both divide by? What can they both divide by, guys? A 4 and an x. And when we do that, we get x minus 2. Okay, and in the numerator, they both divide by a 6, and we get x plus 3. Now the fun part comes. Okay, the x plus 3's cancel. The x minus 2's cancel. And that's pretty much it. We can handle, so we have a 4x left and an x minus 3 left in the numerator. And in the denominator, we have a 6 and an x plus 2. Everybody see where I got that? Anybody lost? Have questions? What else can we do now? We can reduce what? We can reduce the 4/6. Okay, how does 4/6 reduce? What? To what? 2/3. Okay? So even though we're multiplying, you don't really multiply, you know, across, I had some kids kind of trying to do that last period. Okay, so the next one. When the Promethean board decides to cooperate. Okay, so the next one, we're just going to work, oops, wrong one I'm looking at here. We're just going to work number 4 and 5, and then we're going to save 6, 7, 8, and 9 on your notes. We're going to save that for tomorrow because those are division. So in the top, in the numerator here, what multiplies to -3 that adds to 2? What would that be, guys? What's the only multiple of 3? 3, 1 and 3. We just have to get the signs right. It has to be a positive 2, so who gets the positive? The 3. Stop and check it if you need to, guys. 3 times negative 1. Is that negative 3? Yes. Okay. 3 minus 1, is that positive 2? Yes. Okay, down here, what will they all divide by first? A 4, right? So make sure you write that 4. Then you get x squared plus x minus 2. It looks like we're going to need to factor that again, doesn't it? So what we did last period is we went ahead and finished all this other, then we came back to it. What will 2x squared and 8 all divide by? Reed, you getting this written down since you didn't understand yesterday? Okay, so 2, okay, and then what? X squared minus 4. Oh, looks like we can probably factor that again also because it's a what? Difference of 2 squares, right? Okay, and then this bottom one right here, this gets a little messy, so you have to, I encourage you to, kind of keep your word neat, okay? Because it can get a little messy if you let it. Okay, so what multiplies to negative 6 that adds to 1? What would that be? 3 and 2. 3 and 2 have a difference of 1. A positive 3 and a negative 2. Okay, so we got a little bit more work to do on here, so let's make a little more room. Okay, so this x plus 3 and this x minus 1, they were all good to go. Down here, we needed to factor again. Do not forget that 4. Okay, what multiplies to negative 2? What are our multiples of negative 2? What are our multiples of negative 2? 2 and 1. That's easy. Okay, so we know we're going to use a 2 and a 1. We just have to get them where they will make a 1 when they add or subtract. So a positive 2 and a negative 1. Here, this is going to be super easy to factor. X plus 2, x minus 2. The square root of both terms. And x plus 3, x minus 2 on the bottom. Okay, fun time comes. Start canceling out. So I have an x plus 3 that cancels. We have an x minus 1 that cancels. Have an x plus 2 that cancels. Whoa, we have a lot of canceling. And we have an x minus 2 that cancels. What's left? 2/4. What does 2/4 reduce to? 1/2. All of that, and we got to answer for a half. Crazy. So a lot of times you don't get just a number. You go ahead and you get some algebra, but all of our algebra stuff, all of our variables went away, didn't they? Okay. So number 5, I definitely want to work number 5 because I see that this one right here and this one right here, we need to factor by grouping. So make some room over here and let's factor by grouping. Let's get those factored. Get all that nasty stuff over with. Okay, so 2x squared minus 5x plus 3. I know it needs to factor by grouping because why? Because it has a number in the front, right? So we have to include this number in our calculations. So what multiplies to 6 that adds to negative 5, and we're going to put those two terms that meet that criteria in the middle. What does multiply to a positive 6 but adds to a negative 5? Okay, a negative 3 and a negative 2, I might as well kind of match up my 3's and my 2's together. 2's with the 2's, 3's with the 3's. Now we're ready to factor by grouping. Okay, so when you divide, let's see, they'll both divide by a what? A 2x, that's the GCF. Okay, these will both divide by what? A negative 3. Okay, and that's the GCF over there. Your two GCFs, guys, are one of your binomials over here, your binomial factors. Okay, if y'all haven't figured that out. The two things you divide by, the two GCFs, end up being one of your binomial factors over here. So then when you divide them, you get what? X minus 1. Good. And that ends up being your other one. So I think some of you can probably start kind of speeding up your grouping, factoring a little bit. You don't not have to write every single thing down, and that'll help. Okay, let's go over here to this bottom right and go ahead and do that factor by grouping, and we'll have the tough stuff over with. It's like eating your vegetables, right? Okay, so what multiplies to what? Negative 12 that adds to a 1. We've had that come up before. What is that? 3 and 4. Good. Okay, but it has to be a negative 12, so the signs have to be different, right? And we put those in the middle. So has to be, let's see, a positive 4 and a negative 3. And I kind of put, it doesn't really matter, but I kind of put my 2 and my 4 because I know they'll both divide by 2. I put my 3 with my 6 because I know they'll both divide by 3. Okay. And so what will 2x squared and 4x both divide by? A 2 and an x. What will these both divide by? What kind of a 3? A negative 3. So see, I know that 2x minus 3 is one of my terms, okay, because those are the GCFs out here. And then when you divide them, what happens? You get a x plus 2. When you divide these, do we get an x plus 2? Yeah, those cancel. X positive 2. Okay. So now we got the hard stuff over first. Okay, so this one down here, okay, this x to the third minus 2x squared minus 3x. I see a GCF there. So the GCF is x. Then what happens? What do we get? What do we get, guys? X squared minus 2x minus 3. Oh, rats. It looks like I'm going to have to factor that again. Okay, but let's do this one up here. What is this one factor to? What multiplies to 2 that adds to 3? That should be easy. What would that be? 2 and 1. Okay, so you can recopy all of this, but if you're neat about your work, you could just kind of put it right here. I mean, it's up to you what you want to do. Okay, what multiplies to negative 3? I shouldn't have marked that out at first. What multiplies to negative 3 that adds to negative 2? A negative 3, good, and a positive 1. Okay, now we can cancel out. Okay, if your work's not neat, I would probably recommend not doing it that way, but some of you that are neat could probably could do it this way. Okay, so the x minus 3s, the 2x minus 3s cancel. I don't see an x minus 1 to cancel, so we'll move on. An x plus 2 that cancels. An x plus 1 that cancels. I think we've done all our canceling, right? So who ended up being left on the top in the numerator? Who? X what? Minus 1. Who ended up being left in the denominator? Don't forget that little x right there. X and then x minus 3, right? And so that's your answer, your final answer. Okay, so luckily for us, we don't have a lot of grouping ones that we have to do, but they do come up, so it's good that we went over it. Okay?